Captains of Industry, brought to you by Airtel.
Either you love it or you hate it, but black economic empowerment is one of those policies you're going to have to live with. After 100 years of economic segregation in South Africa, BEE has been identified as the only way to redress the injustices of the past. In the execution, though, there have been some problems, such as fronting. In other instances, it's been the problem of gearing and black businesses incurring just too much debt. Where it has worked, only a handful of black millionaires have risen from the ground, and some people are just becoming impatient with the slow process of change. And as we can see, some elements in society are calling for nationalization. Tonight, our Captain of Industry is Philisiwe Buthelezi. She's the CEO of the National Empowerment Fund. Her job is to promote black economic empowerment and also to provide financial solutions that should calm some of these tempers. She joins us now. Thanks so much for your time, Philisiwe. Things have become very radical in the rhetoric. Nationalization, change, let's improve on the quotas, all those kinds of things. What do you read in the political temperature?
Lerato, I think it really has to talk to the pace at which the whole empowerment policy has been implemented in the country. It's been a very, very slow, pace. But also it depends on the definition of black economic empowerment. I realize that we are saying black economic empowerment. In fact, it's supposed to be broad-based black economic empowerment. Because the reason why we actually moved away from the narrow definition of black economic empowerment, it was precisely to actually try and deal with some of the issues that we're raising with me now, where a lot of people were acquiring equity interests, equity stakes in businesses that had nothing to do with their core expertise. So the way we have defined it in the strategy is to say, yes, empowerment has to be about facilitating the entrance of black people into some of the ownership structures, but it has to go beyond that. So the reason for actually using ownership as an entry point, it was just so that you could use some of those black entrepreneurs would be given the opportunity to buy the equity stakes in those companies to drive transformation from within.
I mean, your work entails a lot of things, and some of the things you have to do, for instance, is facilitate ownership of strategic assets in the economy.
Yes.
Because that's not happening fast enough, we're now having the ANC Youth League talking about nationalization. Does that make you anxious?
Very much so. You know, Lerato, I've been reading this book, I've just started reading it. It's called Deadly Decisions. So it doesn't just apply to us as a society and as a country here in South Africa. It applies, to people from all over the world, your world leaders. So what it says is, it could be some small decision that I, as Philisiwe, because I'm in a position of authority and power, a position that I could have made, 5 years ago, that would actually put the whole country at risk. So that's what I'm actually worried about.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's good or bad, but in all of these things, for me, even if you talk about broad-based black economic empowerment, we should always ask ourselves as a society, what is the ultimate objective? Yeah. If you come up with a policy, you apply it, what are these things that would be looking at achieving in the long term? So from my understanding, from my perspective, if I can talk about some of the key challenges, the challenges that we are all faced with as a country, I would actually say, the first one would be the high unemployment levels that we have, in this country. And also it should be issues around growing the economy. So we believe that we should always look at the causality effect. You come up with an action, what do you get?
As a reaction.
As a reaction.
Somebody once said, before you speak, put yourself in the shoes of the other person.
Yes.
Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the Youth League and those who are calling for radical alternatives like nationalization. They look at the implementation of BEE in the last few years. And what they see is established business, resistant to change. So still the top 40 JSE listed companies run by members of the old establishment in many ways. And then they see those black millionaires that have emerged through BEE being less than 10 people. And they're supposed to be the face of transformation. So they look at it and there's resistance, and they look at it on the other side and it's a sort of a black greed. You don't think there's any merit to that?
In fact, there is. I mean, if we had to be honest about, our own assessment that we are making as a concerned economic citizen of this country, I am very worried. But I think we should always look for other ways of, persuading our corporates to actually apply the broad-based black economic empowerment policy in terms of the spirit and the letter of the law. Because what has happened, it has been a tick box approach.
Okay.
I also say, yes, it's a compliance issue. You take ownership, you take, and then you say you're a level 2 or a level 3, and so what? So I think I can understand where they're coming from. What I'm not too clear about is whether by going through the nationalization route, if it will actually take us to where we want to be.
Okay.
And this is how we have always done it in this country. We have never applied any force. This is how we actually got our democracy. It was done through negotiation. I'm sure you'll remember that when we came up with the mining charter in this country, countries like Australia, UK, they were up in arms. I'm sure you'll remember when they withdrew most of their assets from South Africa. There was a total collapse of our mining stocks. But if you look at what happened around that time, it was mainly our mining stocks that were held by countries like Australia. But the most interesting thing that I've just observed recently is that Australia has come up with its own BEE. I say BEE, but is the BEE equivalent to actually uplift and
mining
support.
Taxes, absolutely, to be filtered back into the economy.
It's not mining taxes. It's a new policy that came up, was it last week?
Okay, I just want to focus on South Africa. Facilitation of BEE codes of good practice, that's effectively the mandate of the NEF. When you evaluate the successes and the failures in South Africa, what would you say? Where have things worked well and where are things not working well? And the disconnect that I'm talking about, because it's all good and well to blame it on white business and the resistance of business to transform. It's also when you do involve Lerato in the transformation process, she takes the winner-takes-all approach. It's for her, it's not for the broader society. So there's also a problem, as I said to you earlier on, with so-called black greed.
The way I will define this black greed, I actually sit, on some of the boards, and then I'll talk to other women who sit on similar boards. I've been examining the role of women who actually sit on some of these boards of the most powerful companies in this country. That, you sit on that board, Lerato, not by virtue of your own, virtue of your own
intelligence, intellect.
Yes. Obviously, it has to be based on merit. It has to be based on your track record, qualifications, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's actually thanks to the BEE policies that for the first time we were invited to actually go and represent our people, because we tend to forget. You get, into a big board and you think it's about me as Philisiwe. No, it's about all of the citizens of this country. So the first thing that you should be asking yourself, what role am I going to be playing when I get approached, and what value add? And the value add, or what I've been doing as an individual, has always been that of transformation. But if you talk to white business about transformation, you'll have all your agenda items, and what has been very bizarre, the minute you start talking about transformation, you'll just see the body language, or you talk about women issues for that matter, For me, it doesn't matter whether you talk about black or white women. But when I go there, I have to go and represent the interests of women in this country in general.
Yeah.
They don't want to listen to those types of issues. But we have to be resolute in our approach that we will raise it with our small voices, regardless of what their position is on those. So all I can urge our black executives, black CEOs, black chairs is to actually drive that transformation agenda, from the boards that they sit on.
All right, we're talking about deracializing the economy with Philisiwe Buthelezi, the CEO of the National Empowerment Fund. It's a critical issue in South Africa at a critical juncture where we're starting to feel and hear those ructions for more radical interventions such as nationalization.